Hey guys, so this is my vintage German-made Pfaff 335H2. It's a compound feed, walking foot, free arm rotary hook machine. I think it's possibly the 50s, early 60s model. I'm not entirely sure on that. Uh, but I've been on the hunt for one of these machines for a while now. I have a Pfaff 545 that I really like, and I wanted a free arm machine for binding application. You guys may have seen the synchronized binder video that I did where I converted the 545 to a synchronized binder machine. Well, this is the machine that is actually designed for a synchronized binder. So I'm probably going to get that set up for this, but also use it for just smaller pieces where it's tough to sew on a flatbed. So I'm pretty excited about it. I picked it up from a guy who was retiring and was closing his business down. And when I picked it up, it worked, although it wasn't really finely tuned. You know, you could tell it came from one of those settings where they just used it pretty infrequently, and the settings and adjustments were good enough. So I've been going through and doing a total do-over on all the adjustments, and so far I have most of them done. I'm now working on the hook, and so I thought I would do a video to show you guys kind of. I thought this would be a really good machine because the hook hangs off the edge, and I haven't done a video on hook timing yet because I haven't really found a machine that really offers the visibility I think is necessary to actually make a tutorial like this actually useful. So I thought I would just do it real quick, and the reason why I'm showing this is I'm actually changing out the hook. So I have an original hook. This machine uses a Pfaff 130 or a Pfaff 138 hook, and I have a spare 130 hook that I was going to put in the machine because when I purchased it, it came with a aftermarket bobbin case and aftermarket bobbin basket. Now I don't know why he changed this out. This whole assembly unit is sitting within the stock hook body, a stock Pfaff hook body, but this bobbin basket and bobbin case is an aftermarket system, and I actually haven't decided if I'm going to keep it or not. I need to contact him to find out where this came from because you can see the design is pretty substantially different, so they're not compatible, but the capacity on this is actually bigger as well. This is the Pfaff 130 bobbin, and you can see that it seats pretty much flush in there. Whereas on this, you have this extends out, so you have that much more capacity width-wise, and it's enough capacity to where you can fit in a class 15 bobbin. And I tested it in the bobbin basket. So class 15 will fit in here, a little bit of room to spare. So I don't know if I'm going to keep it on a class 15 or go totally over to the Pfaff. Initially I wasn't so excited about the fact that it wasn't a stock hook, but the additional capacity, especially when you're working with heavier weight thread, is nice. So I have to think about it. I don't know what hook I'm going to keep on it. But anyway, I thought I would show you guys. So let me turn this machine sideways so you can look at the end. Sorry, and you can look at the end. I'm just going to show you how I do it. Let me just totally loosen these screws out so I can remove the hook. Okay, so there's two parts whenever you're going to time a machine. You're going to want to time the needle bar, or the height of the bar here, and you need to time the stroke of the actual hook. So the first step is always going to be timing the hook. You always do the needle bar second once you know the hook timing is perfect. Now it's usually 1.8 to 2.2 millimeters rise of this needle bar stroke before the hook intersects. And it depends on the needle position. So on a standard machine where the needle just goes up and down, it's not going to matter what the stitch length is because your needle bar is fixed position. But on a needle feed and a compound feed walking foot machine, it makes a difference because your needle is actually moving with respect to the hook. The relationship there changes depending on the length of the stitch and where it is in its stroke. So the Pfaff 335 manual calls for you to set the stitch length to 3. Some manuals will call for the stitch length to be set to 0. I actually would prefer if they all were set at 0, but they tell you to set the stitch length to 3 on the Pfaff, and that you want 1.8 millimeter rise of the needle bar before the hook intersects with the axis of this needle. So let me show you. So I adjusted it to 3. I'm going to drop this down so you can get a closer look here. Zoom out. Okay, so there we go. So what I do is I will rock this back and forth until I find the true, well, here, I'll slide this on actually, just so I don't have any interference later. So slide that all the way on, just in a random position. So I'm going to lower the needle bar to the very bottom position. Then I'm going to grab a set of calipers here, some digital calipers, and just adjust out to 1.8 millimeters. I mean, you don't have to be dead on because this is like adjustment is so fine that, okay, so there you go, 1.8. And then what I do is I'll come over here and I'll grab a paper, just a binder clip. Now, the actual piece is that they use for this is it's a shim, basically a U-shaped shim that's 1.8 millimeters thick, and then you put it over here, and then you actually screw on a clamp onto the needle bar. I've been meaning to make one of them, but this has been working for me for so long that I just haven't. So you're at bottom dead center here. You're just going to kind of look and see visually how far down you want your clamp to be. I'll go a little bit higher. Slide the machine forward so I can. Okay. I'm just going to creep up on that, trying to look dead on so that I just get that spacing right. Okay, so that's 1.8 millimeters below. So what happens is, let's see, back out again. So when I rock this hand wheel forward, you'll see that it now stops. Now if you apply pressure, you'll push that clamp down. So you want to be a little bit gentle. So you just want to raise it until it touches and stops. And you can see here now my hook's totally out of whack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower it so there's no risk of me pushing this down. So I'm going to drop the needle down so there's a gap there again. And I'm going to rotate the hook around. I'm going to raise it back up. See, so I'm closer. I'm going to lower it a little bit and try it again. Okay, and then you just creep up. And all you're concerned about right here is just making sure that the hook point intersects with the center of the needle at when this comes in contact, so once it stops. Now the idea here being that you want to have the needle coming out of the fabric to form the loop. So the fabric itself is, you push the needle through, the thread gets pulled down, and then as the needle pulls back out, the friction from the fabric is basically squeezing that thread, and as you pull back up again, you're creating just a little tiny loop at the bottom. And the loop is then caught by the hook. So, you know, if you're basically tuning the size of the loop that's created. So if you have more rise, you're going to create a bigger loop. If you have a smaller rise before that comes in contact, you're having to have the hook point go through a little tiny loop, and that often leads to shredding of the thread and other issues. And if you have too big, then you're going to lead to poor stitch formation. So you really want to dial it in. It's approximately 1.8 to 2.2 for most machines. So if you have a machine, you don't know the manual, just start at the 2 millimeter rise and see how those stitches look. And then you can vary it depending, you know, try 1.8, try 2.2. It depends on the machine. If you have a manual out there, that's great because it'll tell you exactly what the machine was designed around. So there you go. That's it. I mean, that's literally all you do for the hook timing. Let me show you what it looks like on this side. You can see it. That's not going to focus. But you just want it so that hook point, the very tip of the point, intersects right in the middle. And then you just tighten this down. So I'm going to take the clamp off. Oh, and the other thing before you tighten the hook down is you want to make sure that your spacing here. See if I can get this to focus. You want the gap between the needle and the hook point to be very small. You don't want it to come in contact. You want it to just graze, just barely graze it. So you can move the hook on the shaft back and forth to dial that gap in. You don't want there to be actual contact. And you're going to want to use a fresh needle, and you're going to want to use a needle size that's kind of right in the middle of the range of needle sizes that you would use. So if you always use a size 14 needle, you're not going to want to time it around a size 20. You don't want to time it with a 20 needle. If you're doing, sorry, it's not, the focus here is not so great. So if you're using a range, you want to use right in the middle. This one I think is I think it's a size 20 needle. I would have preferred a size 18 because I'll probably be using this between a 16 and maybe a 22 needle size. So we'll see. It's timed right now with the 20 in terms of that spacing, because if you get too far away, if you time it with too small of a needle, then as you go up in needle sizes, you're going to have that hook grazing the larger needles because the diameter is greater. So you want to keep that in mind. Pick it. Or if you know you're only going to use one size needle, always stick with that, and then you don't have to worry about it. But sometimes when you upgrade or you upsize in the needle, you hear a little click, 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 click as the needle rotates around, and that's because it was timed on a smaller needle size, or the hook's too close. Maybe it wasn't set up correctly to begin with, but keep that in mind. And then you can take the clamp off here and just tighten it down. You're going to have a little backlash in the gears because there are bevel gears in here, and you will have some backlash. That's okay. You always want to just do the timing advancing forward. You don't want to go back because you will have some backlash. And so if you try to go forward and then go back, then you have to go forward again. And when you go forward again, you have to take up the slack. See that little rocking? It's just this is just what it is with any kind of gear or screw mechanism, so that it can move freely. I mean, you can see I can spin that by hand, and it's very smooth. So now that's perfect. I'm barely any daylight, and an easy way to check between the spacing of the needle and hook is to get a white piece of paper, put it behind it. It will create a much greater contrast between those two areas. And then the next step would be, after you set the hook timing, you need to set the needle height. And the needle height, you want to make sure you're using the right size needle, obviously, and the needle height is typically adjusted with 1 or 2 screws right on the needle bar. Sorry, let me reach in there so I can screw this. And in this case, on this machine, it's just the single screw here. You'll see it. It's just a clamp typically right there. So you would just loosen that. And the way that you would adjust, I don't need to move this one because it's okay. But you want it so you have maybe 0.8 to 1 millimeter, or a 16th of an inch roughly, of space between the bottom of the hook and the top of the eye of the needle. This is just a visual thing. You're just going to have to get used to it. If you time it and you find that you're shredding thread, then you need to lower the hook, or lower the needle, because you're probably catching it too close. You're probably catching the hook point right where the thread's exiting the eye of the needle, and it's shredding it because it's physically contacting it. You want the hook to fall within the loop. So if you know that this timing's perfect on the hook, then you're going to drop the needle bar. Sometimes you'll have to change the advancing of the hook where you want it to come a little bit later, where you would tune it to where you rotate it counterclockwise. It just depends on what your results are. But that's a good starting point, and just for understanding how they all work. And all machines are this way. You adjust the timing of the hook based on your bottom dead center position of your needle bar. Then your second procedure is to adjust the height of the needle bar to make sure that you have that clearance there, so that the hook is going into the loop. So hopefully that helps. I don't know. I just thought I'd throw that out there. I don't know how many other timing videos there are, but this one I thought was a pretty clear visually. A pretty clear setup so you can see what's happening. So hopefully that helps. Maybe I'll do another demonstration video on this machine once I get it back together. But yeah, hope that helps you guys. Thanks.